When I was starting to learn the instrument, uh, I'm still learning, but when I was starting to learn the instrument, I had a teacher named Tim Abidi. People in my age remember him and should. He was great, and he used to, he was a real guitar tone aficionado. Is I guess the word. And he would always tell me, when he would play me a certain guitar player, listen to the tone. I mean, he was really big on the tone, and I was never sure what that meant, because tone at the time to me meant like the controls on my stereo were like bass and treble, or the tone knob on your guitar was just sort of, brightening or darkening your sound. But I think the assumption was sound quality. So when people, in Guitar Player magazine speak of tone, I think they're speaking of their sound. But guitarists, in particular, seem really afflicted with chasing this concept way more than any other instrument. I mean, way more than they should, too. Singers and violinists and horn players probably don't spend all their time reading Violin Player magazine. And tone is very important to those instruments. I mean, it isn't all, but very important in those cases. The holy grail of tone, you always see this in advertisements. It leads to the obsession of coveting rare and hard to find gear. There's a reason your wife gets mad. She can't hear the difference, and probably neither can you. When you spend $8,000 on an amp head. Um, I really, people of a certain age have a different relationship with gear too, because once upon a time, in the 50s and 60s and such, the only way to get a good sound was through Gibson or Gretsch or Fender, and it was a more expensive gear. The cheap gear used to be crap. You couldn't get it to sound good at all. But we live in an age where you can find great guitars for $200-300, great amps and effects for probably less, and now there's no excuse. Um, a good thing to also remember too is that the tone lives in the person. It's the kind of player he is, but it's also the kind of guy or girl, it's the kind of person they are that matters more than what kind of gear they're using. Um, I'm of the mindset now where I think my thoughts have as much control over my tone on stage than the gear I'm using and my attitude on and off stage. It does count. Um, so I guess it's that parable of trying to find who you are, you know, that can affect your tone just as much. It's not easy to do this. But you're supposed to try, right? The people who are looking to buy their sound entirely are only getting part of the picture. You should also be trying to kind of find out your sound as a person too. Your attitude and your outlook and your philosophy and such. There was like I don't know, like an American Indian parable of finding the secret of who you are. Um, and I think the eagle offered to hide it on the moon. No, they'll find it there eventually. The salmon offered to hide it in the ocean. Somebody will get it there eventually. The buffalo in way in a field somewhere. No, someone will dig it up. But then the mole said, "I'll bury it somewhere where no one will ever think to look." Inside of themselves. I, I think there's truth to that in a lot of ways. I think there's truth to that in philosophy and music and a lot of things. I mean, I suspect there's a reason why no two fingerprints are alike, and that you play guitar with your fingers should, right? I don't think it's any real secret to why you do that. But no one even considers things like their hands, their posture, their breathing, and their minds and their thoughts when they're playing. What are you thinking about when you're playing? Are you? Is it an act of gratitude when you're playing, or is it an act of ego, or is it an act of listen to me, listen, check me out, chief, see how hot I am, or is it, you know, thank you everybody for letting me do something cool like this for you. I mean, we just assume, but isn't it easier to just buy a new piece of gear? You know, Guitar Player magazine does nothing to dispel this myth. But what if it's a new idea or a group of ideas that leads to new tones? Or even the music you're playing itself, the note choices and the duration of them that can do it. No one thinks that, they attack the notes the same way, play the same group of notes, the same, and they expect it to sound different because they plugged it into a new box. It's going to be a veneer of difference. Sooner or later, you're going to realize it's painted on the same, compromised plywood. Who are you at a gig? It's going to affect. This matters. I mean, it's going to affect the band. It's going to affect the sound crew. It's going to affect the audience before you even play a note. Whatever attitude you're bringing to the gig, that matters. Your body language is going to be a profound influence on your sound and your tone and the evening. It's going to matter way more than whether or not you have a TS9 or a TS10 tube screamer, or what kind of germanium resistor is in it, or what country your tubes came from, right? I think things like even smiling when you're playing helps. Being free from tension, relax your neck, your shoulders, your legs. I know you don't play guitar with your legs, but if you're using all your energy to tense things up, there's less to go into the part that's connecting to your instrument. The grip on your pick. People hold their pick way too tightly, more than they need. They're afraid they're going to drop it. That says something about you too, doesn't it? And they grip the neck too tightly. They press way too hard on the fingerboard and wonder why their fingers can't move. That stuff really, really, really matters. And especially for rock players, I'm a rock player, reduce the gain you're using. For heaven's sakes, like the best, crunchiest tones we all love from AC/DC and Zeppelin and Hendrix and stuff like that, they weren't that distorted. Listen again. It's the attack. And get some mid-range happening. This is where the sound of the wood lives. You're playing a wooden instrument. We want to, get the sound of that out. You don't need all of this bottom end. You don't need all this crazy treble and stuff like that. But get the sound of the guitar out there. And you don't need a lot of wattage. You don't need a lot of effects to get up and over the band. Reduce the amount of notes you play. Like, actually allow these notes to have an attack, a sustain, and even a decay. It's okay to hear these notes decay, and it's also okay to follow these notes with some silence too. And then your ears are sort of welcoming the next note listening experience. The goal really shouldn't be to get a very expensive Dumble amplifier to get Robin Ford's tone. It won't work. You haven't lived that man's life. Live your life. The goal is to find your tone with your gear. The gear you're using is probably fine. The tone is in the music, and the music should be in you. So seek there to improve your tone